Watch out, let me get a shot. Where they at? Where they at? Put on that rooftop. Hey! Give me a fucking 42 in the United States!
We're east of the riverbed. And, we're taking fire from the west. Roger, stand by, we're popping smoke. Gun runs north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy. West of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
Welcome to the Combat Leadership Podcast. Here's our host, Mike Etor.
Randy Surles, it's great to finally have you here. We've met virtually and all of that. I've listened to several podcasts that you were on. So I'm really looking forward to this, and I thank you for coming. And for the audience that doesn't know you, Randy, you have a very impressive background, so I'm not going to attempt to do it justice. Why don't you give us your origin story? Literally, where were you born? Where'd you grow up? High school sports? What led you to go in the Army and Special Forces and all that? And what are you doing today? So I'll turn it over to you, my friend.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. So let's see. I was born in Houston. My dad worked for Electronic Data Systems, Ross Perot's computer company. I worked for IBM before that. And he was on working for NASA during the moon landing, but then he switched over. Ross Perot poached him, or I'm not sure exactly how it went down. But I moved around every couple of years with almost like a military. I think Ross Perot ran his company like the military sometimes. But
absolutely, yeah.
So we went to New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and then back to Texas before I finished third grade. And then we moved to Iran. I lived in Iran for 3 years, third to fifth grade, got evacuated out during the revolution in 78, 79, before the embassy hostages were taken. And then I don't know who's familiar with On the Wings of Eagles, which is Ross Perot employed Colonel Bull Simons, retired, to rescue two of his executives that were imprisoned in Iran before the embassy was taken. And they went in there with a bunch of volunteers from the company who had lived in Iran and who were their friends, and they got him out. It's a really great book written by Ken Follett. I think Ross Perot commissioned Ken Follett, who's a really famous author.
Yeah.
And then we moved to the Netherlands for 5 years, and then England. I graduated high school in England. My dad convinced me to go to college. I did that for a year, but I wasn't a really good college student. I was a good high school student, but my heart wasn't in it. That's not really what I wanted to do. I never had any recruiters. I went to a private school in London and a private school in the Netherlands that the company paid for. And I never saw a recruiter my whole life, but for some reason I wanted to join the military. So when I was 19, I went to the recruiter and took the ASVAB, and I got a Ranger contract in 87. So I joined the Rangers. I went to basic, airborne. It was called RIP, Ranger Indoctrination Program. Now it's called RASP, Ranger Assessment and Selection, which is a lot friendlier. That was in the 3rd Ranger Battalion for almost 3 to 4 years. I was in Operation Just Cause, the invasion of Panama in 89. And then I got injured, recovered. And then I went and tried out for the Green Berets. I went to SFAS, Special Forces Assessment and Selection in 91. And then I passed, and then I went to the medic course, which I flunked. And then I went to the weapons course. So I was a Special Forces weapons sergeant for 2 years. And then I went back to the medic course, passed. And then I went to the intelligence course. So I was a weapons, medic, intelligence guy, mostly a medic for most of my career before I got promoted to a team sergeant. I was in 7th group. I spent like 10 years, 15 years in and out of South America, most of the countries down there. I spent a lot of time in Colombia for playing Colombia stuff. I spent a lot of time in Peru, but a lot of time in Central America as well. Speak fluent Spanish. The Army taught me Spanish. And then, of course, 9/11 kicked off. So then I started spending a lot of time in Afghanistan in between my bouts to South America. And then I got assigned to Colombia at the military group down there. So I was the senior list advisor to the mill group commander, who was a colonel. We had the hostages back then. I don't know if you're aware. We had the contractors their plane went down. I think they had some motor engine trouble or something. They went down the jungle.
Yeah,
Took them for 5 years. I think
remember that.
Keith Stencil just did a podcast with Sean Ryan, I think last week. He was
He
one of
did.
the hostages. And so I was there during the rescue attempt, and I wasn't really involved in the rescue. I was kind of involved in the repatriation, maybe, if you want to call it that. I mean, I arranged a lot of security and movements and things like that, but I wasn't super involved in that. But I was there on the ground when it happened. It was pretty cool. And then I stayed there for 4 years, got promoted to sergeant major, went back to 7th Group, was a sergeant major there for a company for 2 years. I was the operations sergeant major for the group for a year. And then I got assigned to Vicenza as the security cooperation sergeant major for about 4 years, 3 or 4 years. And that's where I retired out of. And then I was talking to you earlier. So then I decided to take some leave. I walked the Camino de Santiago, which I highly recommend. They have a lot of nonprofits that support veterans, especially veterans with PTSD. You walk with a psychiatrist and a chaplain, and they pay for your whole trip. And you walk this pilgrimage that's people have been doing for hundreds of years across northern Spain. And you walk 12, 15 miles a day, and you stay in hostels. You meet people from all around the world. And I met my current wife there. And then I got it. And then I got an email while I was walking saying, "Hey, we're training people to be editors." And I already had an MFA in creative writing, and I wanted to write, and I love to read. So I was like, well, let me try that out. So I did my terminal leave. I did the course, started taking clients, but I wasn't initially making a lot of money. So I got a job with a contractor that was working for the VA at the time. So I was a benefits advisor for a year during COVID, which was pretty much taking calls from home at that point. And I built my business at the same time. And then by the end of the first year, I was making just as much money editing as I was with the VA. So I went full time the second year, and that's what I've been doing. I've been ghostwriting and editing and book coaching. Most of the people I work with are military veterans. They're writing their memoirs or writing fiction sometimes too. So that's where we're at.
Yeah. One point I want you to clarify is where did you serve in combat, and what roles did you serve in?
Sure. So I was a specialist with the Ranger tab, team leader, I guess you could call me. I was in the Rangers, so in charge of 3 dudes. And that was in Panama. So I was jumping into Panama, into Rio Hato, Panama, for a little excursion. And then we didn't really have a lot of war except in like Yugoslavia. Old Yugoslavia was with the peacekeeping stuff until 9/11. And once 9/11 kicked off, I volunteered. I had some human intelligence skills. So I volunteered to go over there in 2002. 7th Group had sent a battalion, but it wasn't my battalion. And they had asked people from my battalion with certain skills to go over and help down there. So I did. I got volunteered for 9 months to go down there. And that was my first time to Afghanistan. I ended up going back 4 years later as a team sergeant. And then I went back doing some intelligence stuff. So I went back 3 times there. And then I also did, Kuwait's considered a combat zone, but I don't really
Right. Yeah.
consider that. But I went to Kuwait to supervise, special operations in Syria and Iraq back in 2015. And then, I mean, Colombia, we were getting hostile fire pay. So depends on how you look at Colombia, whether that's
Right.
combat or not.
Right. Right. Were you there at all when they were chasing down Pablo Escobar?
So that's a funny story. So it was 1993 December when he was taken down. I wasn't involved in that. I had just gotten to the Green Berets, the seventh group at the time, and I had volunteered to go to Lancero School. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I am
Lancero,
familiar with that. Yeah.
yeah. So Lancero School is the Colombian equivalent of Ranger School. We actually have a PEP, an exchange person down, a captain, a special forces captain is an exchange officer, and they send one of their officers to our ranger school to be a RI. So there's a Colombian RI in ranger school usually, and then we have an American on their staff in Lancero school, and we send students down there, usually 3 to 5. When I went, there were 7, all from seventh group, but they've come from other units before. And I would say, I've been to the Q course, and I've been to Ranger School, and I've been to RIP, but that was probably one of the hardest schools I went to, only because I just got out of Spanish school and by no means spoke it fluently. And so I guess when you go to these other schools, even though there's some secrecy in the Q course and SFAS, like, oh, you don't know what the events are, but when you're there, you hear rumors. My brother's sister's mother went, he said that, whatever. And you kind of know what to expect. And even if you don't know what to expect, if you get hurt, everyone and their mother's going to do everything they have possible to get you they have a plan. It may not work perfectly, but they have a plan to get you evacuated out, and everyone and their mother is going to go admin to make sure you're okay. I never felt that in Lancero School. I never felt that I was going to get anywhere anytime soon if a poisonous snake bit me, if I fell off a freaking cliff in the jungle, if, that was the biggest thing, the mental challenge of it's me and the other 3 Americans around me at the time that are going to take care of each other, and everything else is going to go to hell. That was one thing. And the second thing is every day was just a surprise. And I've been to courses like the Special Forces Assessment Selection. Every day is a surprise too, but you assume it's going to be running or rucking, and you just don't know how far you're going to ruck or run. No. Lancero School, every day is a surprise. Like, today, we're going to beat the crap out of you. Excuse my French. Tomorrow, you're going to crawl through a trench of barbed wire like it's World War II, and we're going to beat you with sticks, with the staffs, and throw hot coals on you if you don't crawl fast enough. So these things, maybe the Colombians had some idea that we're going through because their brother's sister's mother went there and they knew something, but every day was a complete surprise for me. And I was like, well, what are we doing? We're wrestling an electric eel for what are we, what's the learning? What's the, yeah. So yeah, that's why it was hard for me, because I was just every day I was surprised about what the hell we were doing and why we were doing it. What was the purpose? What was the task? There was never task conditions and standards. It was like, wrestle that eel. I'm like, I don't remember this class. Did we have a class on this? Shouldn't we have a class on wrestling electric eels before we do it? Is there a safety brief? So.
I went to, as a Marine captain, I went to the Infantry Officers Advanced Course at Benning. So the captain's career course, infantry, pre-command, they usually went. And there were Colombians in my group. And there was a guy, Major Villamil, I'll never forget this. And he was a little dumpy guy by that time. And he was talking about Lancero School and he had broken English, and he said he was given a country brief. He was given a Lancero brief, and he said, Lancero, yes, I do long ago. Today, I try, I die. In other words, it's long ago. And then I don't know if you ever knew a guy in the Rangers, an officer who later became a Special Forces Major General named Sean Mulholland.
Yes.
Sean was in my small group.
Oh yeah. So, well, he was the commander of 7th Group for a while, but
Yeah.
he went to the Lancero course before me, and he ended up
Yes.
he ended up becoming the instructor the year after I left.
Okay.
And I
So
actually
he
lived in his apartment when he was
really
down in Columbia.
okay. So he told me when Edgar, the major, was given the brief on a break. And he said, I went to that school, and he was a small guy, but a tough guy. And he had been in the Ranger Regiment. He'd been in a Ranger Reconnaissance Detachment, and I don't think he had been to SF yet. I think he went to FSAS after that school in '89. But he told me, I'd been to Ranger School, I'd been in a Ranger Regiment, and he said, I got to be honest with you, that's the friggin' hardest course I ever went to. That's a no-shitter, he said.
Yeah, so he went to Lancero School while he was in SF, so he'd already been,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
but I mean, there's just I don't think it's the same thing, they do, the drill sergeants do, right? They target they know someone in the 30-person platoon is going to mess up, and so everyone gets punished, right? But they're always planning on punishing you anyway, right? So, somebody every night it was time to go to bed, someone did something wrong during the day, yesterday, whatever, and then we went up running for like 3 hours around the quad, singing cadence before we went to bed at like 2 o'clock in the morning to wake up at like 5. And it was like every day was this constant harassment, lack of sleep. But it was like 2.5 months long, 3 months long. I forget. It's like forever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, let's get going here. Well, the first question I always ask, Randy, you're kind of a known figure. If someone ran into you in a hotel, you're both on the elevator, they figure out who you were, and they only got 5 floors to talk to you. They say, Randy, look, I ain't got much time, but I'm interested in your combat experience. What's your philosophy, your basic executive summary? What's your philosophy on combat leadership? What would you share with him?
Yeah. So I think I don't think I have anything that most military people don't learn in the basics, because I feel like train like you fight is probably my number one. Like the rehearsals we did, the SOPs we established. I was in the Rangers. I was in the Rangers for 2 years before I went to Just Cause. But we rehearsed airfield seizures, we did 2 airfield
Yeah.
seizures. We went there.
Yeah.
We rehearsed them all the freaking time. That was our bread and butter, right? And so I don't think anyone had a doubt of what was going on. And we rehearsed all the basics, react ambush and, everything, every freaking day. I mean, that's what we did every freaking day. I don't know what normal infantry units do if they're doing that every freaking day, but it seemed like even on the weekends, because I live in the barracks, so they could reach out and touch me anytime they wanted to. It was like, hey, we're going to work on something today. And then when later on, since I had the opportunity to go to Afghanistan in 2002, 4 years before my battalion actually went, I realized that because we spent so much time in South America, we really didn't do a lot of, mount training, for lack of a better word. We didn't really do like little villages or city or house to house stuff. And so when we went to Colombia right before we went to Afghanistan, about 6 months before we went to Afghanistan, and I took my team and I said, all right, on the weekends, I'm like, all right, let's build a little city. Let's practice this stuff. Let's figure this stuff out. And we did live fires on our little city, and we just practiced and practiced and practiced. I never really had a doubt that my guys were going to do a good job there. And then when we got there, all the equipment we'd rehearsed with was on the ground, but it wasn't what we rehearsed with. And the first thing I did, I told the commander, and the commander agreed, was like, hey, we're going to do about a week of rehearsals before we even go out the wire, because we needed to make sure we have ATVs. We don't even know we haven't even thought about how to incorporate ATVs in any of our SOPs. Yeah. Let's figure this out. And we did, and there was some grumbling. The guys were like, "Wow, we've been practicing for 6 months for this," and I was like, "Yeah, but not with this stuff." And inevitably, the first couple of days we were making errors, and we fixed it up. Also, we hadn't worked with the Afghans that were assigned to us, and so we had to incorporate those guys in with too. So we never not. I don't want to say, I think it's more luck than anything, right? But I didn't lose any of my guys. None of my guys got wounded. None of my guys got killed in the 9 months we were there. And I know a lot of it was luck, but I gotta put down, like, we trained the hell before we got there, and I think that made a big difference. I think another thing I might mention is. And this, I say fight like you want to win, and that seems like it would be a duh. But I feel like sometimes, especially at the end, the middle and the end of the war, like, there was no winning. I had to start justifying in my head, like, why are we going outside the wire? Is it worth it to go travel 5 hours through IND infested roads to pick up a guy that might have did something, or do we have enough information? Like, when we first started the war, everyone couldn't wait to get out of the wire. But when I got there, I think it was 2007 or 6, when I went back as a team sergeant, me and the captain and the chief would sit around a table and, like, hey, let's rack and stack our targets. If this guy is a danger to American soldiers or civilians, or if he's a danger to people, he's going to kill people, let's go get him. If he's like, we get all kinds of weird human intelligence, and some of the guys were like, so this guy's stealing from his neighbor, that has nothing to do with us, or not. And other people were like, well, he's a criminal. It's like, we're not here to arrest criminals. Stop. Yeah. So well, like, in the end, we weren't fighting to win a war, right? We were fighting to ideally give, Afghanistan its freedom and independence. Yeah. But that didn't work out too well for us. But in the end, like, I know after 2010, 2011, it was even more like the Afghans in the front is the way it was treated, which I think was probably the right way to do that. But in the middle, early in the middle, it wasn't like that. A lot of times we didn't have Afghan partners. And so we had to kind of, are we even at war anymore? Or are we just, are we just kind of spinning our wheels here? We had to figure it out. And then I remember talking about this, thinking about this question before, and understanding the motivation of your guys, and making sure they understand that you're in their foxhole, for lack of a better word, and that you're thinking about them, and you're not thinking about your own glory or whatever, your own career, and making sure that everyone gets a say, even if you get the final say. Everyone can pitch in and go, what are we doing? And I'm like, let me explain what we're doing if you don't understand it. But also thinking about what the enemy is worried about, or the enemy is like, put yourself in their shoes. And when you do something, are you making everything worse? Are you pissing them and the villagers off worse because of what you're doing? And how can you avoid that or minimize that? And I don't think, especially at the beginning of the war, I don't think there was enough American leaders thinking like that. They were just like, hey, go out there and, patrol this area and round up everybody, whatever. But you gotta, if you're, if they live there their whole life, and you're going house to house, searching, dumping their stuff on the ground, and not thinking about, like, of course they're not going to be there to help you. You're making their life a living hell. So I really, when I went there the first time, I was there with a really good team, and I saw how everything was working and how they were working, and how everything, how, because it was before, in 2002 there wasn't very many IEDs in Afghanistan. It wasn't until after we went into Iraq that the IEDs started slipping back into Afghanistan. And when I came back in 2006, 2007, there were like Jalalabad was where I was at, and there that was like called IED Alley, was that Highway 1 there into Pakistan. And it was just like, how do we mitigate pissing off everyone and making them our enemies? And we would do a lot of like medical, trips into the villages in order to kind of maintain goodwill and build schools and things like that. And we do that intentionally. Like, no one told us to do it, but I just didn't want the whole place pissed off at us. And I don't know if that was part of why we never got hurt or killed. I mean, there was obviously firefights that had nothing to do with the villagers, but anyway, that's what I would say.
Yeah, yeah, well said. Well, I want to ask you, I think most of us, I did a career in the Marine Corps and did it in the Army. I think it's a given that most of us, in fact, maybe all of us that did a career, we can always point back at someone in the past, early in the career, a mentor or a role model that helped us along, helped shape us. Relative to being a combat leader, is there anyone, role model or mentor, who had an active role in shaping the combat leader, Randy Surles?
So, you know what the problem I think with the military is like your leaders are only around for a short amount of time before they're rotated out. Like, especially
Yeah,
officers for sure. They're there a year or maybe two max, and then they're going on to their next either leadership or staff position, right? The
yeah,
enlisted, ideally, the enlisted are down around a little bit longer, but even nowadays in today's army, every 2 years they're kind of splitting out too, really 2 or 3 years. Everyone's got a lot more after 9/11 than before 9/11. There's this list. Hey, you got to meet these lists if you want to get promoted. And it's like you got to have like 5 positions before you get, your
yeah.
10 years in the army. So you got to be moving around, competing for different positions and making sure you check all the blocks. So I had a couple really good team sergeants, which are the people I spent a lot more time with than the officers, because really the officers are, they're there 6 months. They're the new guy trying to pick up everything they can. Then they go on one deployment if they're lucky to, and then they're gone. Right. I was
Yeah.
on the same team. I was on the same team for over 10 years, and all the way from E6, E7, and then I switched. I went across the hall when I became an E8. But all those guys on my team, I knew a lot of them too. And I had a couple. I basically didn't have anyone that was like that I would call up and say, "Hey, what would you do in this situation?" I didn't really have it. I had a peer that was same rank as me, team sergeant, same time as I was, and he had taken the team a year earlier. And I would call him, and I would ask him questions. But I didn't really have a mentor that my whole career that I would call. I had some really good team sergeants that some of them were great, but I didn't like everything they did. And some of them weren't great, but I liked some of the things they did. And I just tried to adopt all those. And I asked a lot of questions. Some of them weren't very tolerant to questions, like, shut up. And I'm like, okay, well, I learned a lot from you today. And some of them were more than willing to share, whatever they were, if there was a database they were making or why we were doing something.
Yeah.
So I tried to adopt all the good things that I thought were good. And actually, it's the reason so when I was in E7, I was on a scuba team. You get scuba team, you get scuba pay, which is like, I think $350 a month or something. But it's more than your E70 E8 pay. So when I was getting ready to get promoted to E8, I was like, oh man, I'm going to lose money on this deal, and I'm going to have a lot more work. And I was kind of irritated. But right about the same time, I was not super happy with my team, the way my team sergeant was running. We had a couple successful ones before him that I thought did a lot better job, and so I'd go up to him and I'm like, hey man, can I lead this next trip? Can I'm because I he we actually Rome he wasn't he was promotable. He wasn't an E8, and we had almost the same amount of time in the military. And I was like, hey man, do you mind if I lead the PDSS and make the plan for this one, and then you can look it over and mentor me through it? And he's like, yeah. So we got to do everything the way I wanted to do it. And then he looked it over and didn't have anything to add. So, but that's when I decided, you know what, maybe I need to be an E8 and go up a rank and take over a team now, because I feel like I know more and I'm more ready to lead than people who are leading me. And that's kind of how I decided to get promoted, I guess.
Yeah. 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 Great. Well, I wanted to ask you, this is the age-old question, and it really sets up the rest of the interview, Randy. You got a lot of combat experience, but like anyone that stays in 20 years or more, you got more time in peacetime, and even the guys in the long wars and all that. I mean, I knew Marines that were, 3 tours throughout Iraq, 2 3, and now they're still in. And so they might have combined, and I'm not denigrating this at all, it's impressive. They may have 4 years of combat service. I mean, at front line, and now they have 16 years or 18 years garrison. So as a leader, do you think there are any major differences or any differences between garrison peacetime leadership and combat leadership?
Definitely. Yeah, I do. There's people that are just really good at the admin pieces of leadership and impressing the right people, and they know, and there's a piece of that for both, that every leader should understand the politics of the military, right?
Sure.
Otherwise they won't be a leader very long. But sometimes if you don't kind of go back to my first rule, which is train as you fight, then you won't be able to make these decisions. Who knows what the right decision is until afterwards, right? But at least some people just don't make any decision when they get stressed out. And so I think that the combat leader needs to really assess the situation, listen to feedback if there's time, and make things happen. And that's something that a peacetime leader might not ever face that kind of stress, And so the war games that we play have to be as realistic as possible in order to put that stress on them, because you can only do so much, right? You can't be wounded people, but you can fake the injuries. You can have your casualties, but it's never the same thing, right? Now, I went to the medic course, and the medic course does a pretty good job having the casualties we need to make them as realistic as possible. But for the most part, train as close as you can to how you fight, and kind of the AARs, I think, are awesome. Without every AAR I ever went to, I learned something from, and not blowing them off and making them kind of like, okay, well, we all want to go home. Let's forget about it, or let's like you give me something. And I always hated when they force people to give it to, and that guy didn't have anything to say, and then he just wasted time. But I really think that everyone needs to pay attention and participate if they have something pro or con to add. And so I think I answered your question, but yeah, I do think there's a difference, and I think the difference is in the decision making in the combat environment is such a different skill that can only be actually honed in combat, but you have to consistently try to do the best you can in peacetime.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. My personal experience is, with my limited time in combat, the guys who were indecisive in peacetime back in the rear, they crammed a 1 hour decision into 3 weeks. They just couldn't do it. They wanted to double check. They were so afraid of making a mistake. They didn't get any better in combat. That indecisiveness and inability to make a quick decision when a quick decision was needed, they didn't, the combat genie just didn't hit them on the head. Now all of a sudden they're a decisive combat leader. Those guys could be dangerous, So I agree with what you're saying. I want to ask you this, because you've observed so many combat leaders. I'm going to ask you a two-sided question here. Are there any traits, habits, personalities, practices that most of the very best combat leaders you observed shared in common? And then the bad side of it, are there also traits, habits, and practices that the bad ones shared in common? So what did the good seem to have in common? And then let's talk about the bad.
So I think the best of the good were, first of all, they had a very open, I don't know how to word this, but basically you didn't feel like you're going to get your head chopped off when you asked a question,
Yeah.
So having that relationship with the people you're in charge of is gonna make you a better leader, because A, they feel heard, and B, they may notice or have an idea that you haven't thought of, because 15 minds are better than one. And so being a good listener, a good communicator when you have the time, and also that comes with, train as you fight, right? So if and the AARs, right? If you're like, hey, I haven't been to war either, or I haven't been to this war before. This is what we're doing. Does anyone have a better idea that you want to try out? And then when you implement it, like, which is the best idea? Which one should be part of our SOP? Having that open discussion and be willing to do that, as opposed to, I had one team leader who pulled out the 7-8 and like, this is how you do it. And it says right here, this is the way you do a close ambush. And and this is the only way we're going to do it. I'm like, I was like, well, what if? He's like, no, this is the way we're going to do it. You're a ranger, you know better. I was like, well, that's not the way it works. You can make stuff better. You can figure other ways to do things that make sense. And he just didn't have the open mind for that. So that, I would say, the communication, the listening, and building an environment where people can ask questions without, being belittled or something like that. That would be.
Would the word approachable apply here? Be approachable?
That's a good one.
Yeah, cool. All right, how about the bad side of it? And for those youngsters out there listening to this, you read about the good ones, you rarely hear about the bad ones. But I know the Army is no different than the Marine Corps, Randy. There are some average, mediocre, and then you have some absolute. They're a small minority, but you have some guys, and you just can't believe that they are in the military. They're just so bad,
Well, I mean, obviously, the exact opposite is bad, in my opinion. And those people also tend to be more ignorant, just because they won't listen to anyone. They think they
Yeah.
have the best decision, and then on top of that, they seem to be the people who are looking out for themselves, and also think that everyone else is trying to undermine them. I mean, I rarely met anyone who was trying to undermine anybody in the military. I personally think the military is one of the most equal opportunity jobs in the United States. Most people are. I mean, even officers, especially at the lower ranks, no one's competing directly against each other for promotion, especially the enlisted, right? An enlisted infantryman that's an E6 who's a squad leader and has three other squad leaders in his platoon, he's not directly competing with any of those guys to get promoted to E7. I mean, in the big picture, there are only so many are going to get promoted, but he's not like trying to make this guy look bad so that he can get promoted. And I never saw anyone do that anywhere. I don't think now the officers have a different promotion system where you got below the center. I don't know how the Marines do it, but I know the Army is when they get their OER at the end of the year, they're either, below the center, above the center, or the top 10% of the center. And if they don't get above the center or top 10%, then for two times in a row, they're probably not going to get promoted. So that doesn't always apply for the officers, but for the enlisted, there's 5 bazillion infantrymen that are E5s and E6s, and you're not competing against your buddies in the platoon. And so because of that, I just now I've lost track of the question, but am I approaching the question at least?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The good and the bad leaders. So you gave
Yeah.
us a good one on the good, and you talked a little bit about the bad. That you're saying they are the opposite of the good traits. They're not approachable. They won't listen. They think they know it all. And all of that. Their people are afraid to go to them and all that. So no, I thought you answered that well. I want to ask you this, Randy. I mean, I was enlisted Marine first, and I was surrounded. When I came in '74, there were still World War II and Korea vets in the ranks. Impressive guys. First sergeant had been in Iwo Jima, Japanese bayonet scar down his face. I mean, you didn't trifle with these guys. Vietnam vets were everywhere. And, I looked around, I realized in this gun club, you know, you can't be faulted for being in peacetime, but in this gun club, you're never going to be a full-fledged member unless you get some time in combat, and that is just luck of the draw sometimes. I know guys that did 20 or 30 years, never, there were no wars during that whole time for them. Or there were some brush fires, they weren't in the right spot at the right time. So where I'm going with this, I used to ask myself these questions, if not worry and agonize about them. And I think most people have them. And I want to ask you this. For the youngsters out there, I think they're same as, 19-year-old Mike, will I be too afraid to perform under fire? If I'm a machine gunner or a team leader or a grenadier or a platoon sergeant, will I actually remember what I'm supposed to do in combat? Will I be able to handle seeing my friends killed and maimed? And then the big one, which we always assume in the military, but I think people have to think about it a little bit. Am I going to be able to pull a trigger and kill a guy in front of me? And those are some basic questions. I probably had more, but those are the nutshell. You get the gist of what I'm asking you here. Did you have any of those questions in your mind before you went into Panama, so to speak?
I don't remember having those because I just remember rehearsing and planning and checking my gear and getting it ready. And I think it's a lot different than Vietnam and World War II and maybe probably Korea too, in the fact that, we weren't in country. There was not a whole lot of time to think about it. There was like preparation, get your chute on, get on the plane, 6 hour flight where we all slept. And then we're jumping out of the plane and there's bullets coming through the skin of the aircraft. And then we just did what we trained to do, which is take the airfield. I don't feel the only time I got scared and wasn't afraid to do my job, but I ended up, we jumped at 500 feet. I hit a flagpole. I broke my fibula. And when I hit the ground, and I had to crawl to the assembly point. So I was separated from everyone. And there was a lot of people running around, and I was trying to get to cover and also get to the assembly point so I could get some help. And I was stuck out there for about 6 hours before I got there, before I crawled to the assembly point. So that was the only time I had fear, but it wasn't fear that I wasn't going to do my job. It was fear that I wasn't going to get out of there alive because I couldn't do my job. I feel like if I had been with my squad doing what I was supposed to be doing, I think I would have just been doing my job because we trained it. We did such great training in the Rangers, especially.
Well, hold that thought, because the next thing I want to talk about is that very often misinterpreted term called discipline. And I'm a Ranger Battalion fan, from what I know about them and all that. And I always viewed them as probably the height of discipline. So it's a good thing talking to you here. I'm sure you were the same way as a young PFC or specialist or whatever. I mean, I was, 18 years old, PFC Lance Corporal. Like, why? Why do these lifers, why are they so hyped up on haircuts? What's the deal with the barracks inspection when we do it every week? Wouldn't, like, once a month? I mean, we're adults here. Can't we sweep the floor? Do we really have to have some NCO come and inspect this? What's the big deal about PT and all of that? So, for generations since the Roman times, they kind of considered that stuff, they call it chicken shit. Like, why do we do this stuff? Has no bearing on combat. So I want to ask you, you've done it, even as an SF guy. There are things you have to do in peacetime that, you got to do it. You're in the Army still, albeit, you got some relaxed grooming regs and all of that. But does any of that peacetime stuff that the young guys always think is bullshit, does any of it actually transfer? Does it add any value in combat? And here's the thing, I wasn't in the Army, I wasn't in the Ranger Regiment and all that, but reading about them, talking to guys that were in, I mean, you guys were the antithesis of the regular Army. I mean, you guys, the attitude, I believe, was excellence in all that we do. So I think when you were in, the grooming standards weren't relaxed. I mean, you guys always had high and tights, and every Ranger that I ever saw in peacetime looked perfect in uniform. And from what I understand, the PT is relentless. You know what I mean? I mean, relentless, really, almost no breaks, a lot of humps, a lot of force marches. And to your point, gun drills and tactical drills, SOPs, out the ass every day, all the time. And I'm not sure if anybody was grumbling about it, but I think Rangers probably took it to another level. So you would know, was there value in combat, in Panama? And then, your time in SF, the stuff that you did with your SF pre-combat and all of that didn't necessarily have a direct tactical flair and all that. Does this stuff carry any value, or should we just not do it at all?
So let me divide that up with my experience in the Rangers and the Green Berets. As soon as I got to the Green Berets, I never lived in the barracks again. There were some haircut requirements, but they were pretty lax.
Yeah.
And the inspections were limited to equipment readiness inspections, and so it was a different world. I don't know what Rangers are like today, but when I was in, absolutely high and tight every week, pressed uniform if you're in garrison. shine boots if you're in garrison. If you're out in the field, you could wear rougher stuff. Um, so I would say physical fitness, absolutely. You don't know what you don't know, especially the lower ranking guys. They don't have the discipline to do that. Most of them. I mean, I never. You asked me for my biography if I did any sports. The only sports I did was cross country, track, and swimming, but I didn't do any team sports. And so a lot of the PT we did, of course, was in squad or platoon, and it wasn't something that I had ever done before I came in the Army. And so I think the PT is super important because the leaders need to know how fit everyone is and where the weakest link is. As far as the inspections of, like, when you say inspections, I think barracks, like haircut.
Yeah.
I mean, we did the high and tight. We thought we did that. Eventually, it was a thing of pride because everyone knew we were Rangers, right? So I never had a problem with that. And then, of course, Nicolas Cage was a Ranger with long hair before long hair was cool, and we were all like, this is a stupid movie. He didn't have a high and tight. But in the Rangers, man, the barracks inspection was like the most worthless thing I ever. I understand it has to be clean. Don't get me wrong. And in the Green Berets,
Right.
and the problem with the Green Berets are they're so lax that, hey, we need to keep our own space clean. Every now and then, as a team sergeant, you're like, hey, everyone, we're not even going to do PT today. We're going to do a deep clean of the place because you guys are pigs, and we're going to teach that. But when we go down to these, third world countries, and we're given an area to live in and work in, we got to keep it clean because there's all kinds of crazy stuff that can happen, and we don't have a hospital to go back to. We don't want to send anyone back to the hospital because one person is 10% of our team sometimes. So that's super important in the way that we need to get into the habit of doing it. Does it need, I mean, I don't know if you remember, we used to have to wax the floors and buff them.
Oh yeah, buffers. Yeah, absolutely.
Which was probably a fire hazard in reality. I mean, we burned the wax to melt it to put it on
Yeah.
but that was, to me, every day was the most, or twice a day, well, it was like the most worthless thing we ever did in the Rangers. And it was super, in my opinion, unfair because I was in the barracks where we had married people that didn't ever have to do any of this stuff. And they're like, well, I don't live here. I was like, yeah, but do you clean your house freaking 3 times a day? We're spending like 3 hours a day cleaning this place up because you guys nothing better to do. So in a way, I kind of agree with that assessment that was, well, it was a little bit overboard in the old Army. And I think it softened up a little bit. I think there's a place for it. Just like I said, when we go down south, hey guys, I was a medic most of the time. I'm like, hey guys, we need to keep this place clean because I don't want to send any of you guys back home because we're sick because we're a bunch of pigs. So we need to figure this out. And that was the team sergeant and the medics were on top of that most of the time. Yeah, I mean, there's pieces of it that kind of went overboard, especially in the old Army. I spent 15 years in the Army before 9/11. And then I spent the second 15 years, after 9/11. So there was kind of two different armies, and I don't know if it was going back. I was so far away from privates by the end of my career that I don't know how everyone was reacting to the garrison priorities back then, or when I got out.
Yeah, I understand that. I want to approach that question from a different angle. I'm putting words in your mouth. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that you do agree that individuals in combat must possess self-discipline. They must be disciplined. They must do what they're supposed to do. They must be counted on to do it with minimal supervision, and that all else being equal, a disciplined individual and a disciplined unit will do better than than the opposite, you know?
I agree with that. But just like you said that people can't, train for combat without being in combat. That's what good leaders come in, right? If the discipline is in disarray, especially when they hit the combat, the leader is supposed to get these guys on track, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. And that the money shot that's coming here, the punchline is knowing what you know. And I want your answer to be not SF, but just broad, combat arms. If you're a combat, I mean, if you're an NCO, senior NCO officer, what do you think what would you do to instill discipline in peacetime and garrison training that hopefully will transfer to the combat environment? The barracks inspections, you already said your piece on that. I agree. If they gave you that 3 hours back, what do you think that 3 hours would have been better spent on some days doing? We should be doing this because that had direct application to combat. Anything that you can think of off the top of your head?
I mean, not much that we haven't already talked about. SOPs, knowledge of weapons.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in combat arms my whole life, so making sure, hey, does the rifleman know how to work with the machine gun in case the machine gun team goes down? How are we going to get that thing up? So cross training, I would use most of that time for that.
Yeah. I'll give you an example. I still have a good network in the Marine Corps, and during the long wars, these guys were cycling through, and they started some units started taking shortcuts, during their pre-deployment training and all that. And so they found reasons why they really didn't have to do long humps, force marches with loads on them. It's a pain in the ass. I'd rather run 10 miles than hump 10 miles. It's hard work and all that. But the problem was because they didn't do that, their guys were not conditioned for a lot of physical exertion under 120 degrees weather. And those units had tremendous heat casualties, heat stroke and all of that. And some of these guys just broke down after a few weeks. They were not conditioned to be on their feet hauling a load, because many of them didn't have vehicles. They were on their feet, in Iraq and Afghanistan. Any thought on that about the temptation to avoid the hard stuff in peacetime that does have a direct application? Physical fitness, can you perform in heat, stuff like that?
No, I mean, that goes to, analyzing the situation and make sure you're training like you fight. And
Yeah.
I think what happened in Afghanistan for a lot of the Green Beret teams was we were doing everything on vehicles almost. And so they were becoming focused on, hey, we got a vehicle so we can bring everything in the kitchen sink, right? Instead of, figuring out how to pack for a walk, and not pack for a walk like Q course, 80-pound rucks, but something like. So, it's funny because when we were looking for the hostages in Colombia, our team was paired up with a Colombian SF team, and they were bringing like 15, 20-pound rucksacks, except for like maybe the radio operator had a little bit more, and they would share a mosquito net between two people. And so all this stuff was figured out that, hey, we can't walk for 3 or 4 or more days in the jungle with 80-pound rucks. And the Americans were like, here we are. We got everything in the kitchen sink at our rucks. And it wasn't because we were in vehicles in Afghanistan. It was because that's why we got trained in the Q course. But with most of my guys, because I was the only one that went to Lancero school, they never walked in a real jungle. I was like, dude, you're not going to walk in a jungle with that big freaking pack. I guarantee it. And so you had to retrain them to do jungle operations and even my captain, who would, before he became SF, had been in an infantry unit, right? And so he gets there. and our guys end up going on a mission to two of them end up doing a recon mission to help find the Americans, and it's all been approved and they're out there, and he's like, what he was kind of out of the net, and I was like, what's your problem, sir? He's like, I want to check on my guys. It's like, the check-in times are this time and this time. He's like, that's ridiculous. When I was in Afghanistan, I could call them anytime I wanted and know where they were. I was like, yeah, because you had a vehicle that had unlimited power and batteries, so radio could be on 24/7. But these guys are carrying like 6 batteries, and that's only going to last them a week. They come on. This is the way we trained during Vietnam. This is the way we trained during the Q course. Don't you remember all this stuff? And he was just so used to like having a vehicle that just carried everything. So making sure that you understand all the other thing we trained, we were a mountain team, and no one told us to do this, but hey, if a aircraft crashes in the mountains, who are they going to send? They're going to tell the mountain team. They're going to do some, analysis and say, we got a mountain team over here, let's send them. So we should practice that. And I made sure our team did a lot of rehearsals on, getting bodies off of high cliffs and things like that, so we could do that kind of stuff if we were called upon to do it. Just now, and analyzing all the different stuff that you could possibly do in combat, and walking with a ruck is usually one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to talk a little bit about fear and uncertainty. You've already mentioned fear a little bit. And again, this podcast is aimed at guys that haven't done it yet, Randy. They're, somebody's going to be watching this, not even born yet. You know what I mean? So I think everybody, along with those questions that, that I asked you, about pre-combat Mike, and I think most people, the fear thing, you hear about it and people say, well, this guy froze. He froze. He was a coward, or he froze, just couldn't, he was paralyzed and all of that. So I think it goes through everybody's mind, I'm going to feel fear, I'm sure. Everybody tells me, at some point you're going to feel it, but you have to overcome it and all of that. What's your best advice? Because I know you said you really didn't feel it all that much. I think you had a couple incidences when you were in SF and deployed and all that, but what's your best advice for a guy like, is there anything you feel that people can do in advance to better be able to adapt to fear if, the human mind, brain starts emitting fear signals?
I mean, the thing that motivated me to get over whatever I was going through was I'm not the only one I'm responsible for. Yeah. Even when I wasn't in charge, there was other people that were depending on me. And if I froze and did nothing, I just let everyone down. Mm-hmm. And one of the pieces of the puzzle for, unfortunately, we're talking about this, is most of my career was in small teams. Rangers, most of the time we worked in a squad or a platoon, but as an SF guy, it was always a 12-man team. And I was on a team for almost 15 years, 10 before I became a team sergeant, and then 3 or 4 when I was a team sergeant. So, I knew all those 12 guys really well, and letting them down wasn't an option. So even if I was afraid of what might happen to me, I was more afraid of what might happen to them if I didn't do something. So I think putting that in perspective is one thing you need to think about. And then I spent a lot of time just thinking about what could go wrong and having a plan for that. Now, I'm not going to say I had a plan for everything that went wrong in my entire life, but having a plan for everything I could anticipate helped me to address the problems that I hadn't anticipated, because I could just, take one of the other plans and alter it a little bit and see, and hopefully it worked out. But I think it was just always trying to think of the contingencies and the what could go wrong, and then also putting everyone else above me as far as my responsibility to them and to bring them back alive and well.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to talk about something that's referred to throughout the ages. I'm not sure if it was Clausewitz
I
or
think it was.
Napoleon. Fog of war, the
Define
fog
that
of
for
war.
me.
Say again?
Can you define that for me?
Yeah, I'm going to. Whoever coined it, it said that in combat, there's this fog of war that even the most simple task suddenly seems very difficult, if not impossible. Things speed up or they slow down. We've rehearsed this, but now it's real. And that fog of war, we didn't rehearse that. We didn't plan on the helicopter crashing, or we didn't plan on half our guys being lost or something. The fog of war. In other words, the age-old adage that, you can rehearse and all that, and you must rehearse, but you're really rehearsing knowing that the plan's probably not going to go off without a hitch. You're going to have to adapt at some point. Any thoughts?
So I think the rehearsing and the war games we play is the best way to prepare for this fog of war is to lose. But when you play the war games, when you do when you play against Op 4, having the when is this going to be over? Like, it's never going to be over until I figure a way out of it. Because in war, if you can't figure a way out of it, you're probably going to die. So you just can't quit. You just keep coming up with solutions until it's over or until you get reinforced. I mean, I don't love the whole Black Hawk Down scenario, but they didn't have a choice, right? It was either keep fighting until they get back to the airfield, or just roll up in a ball and get killed. And I think that the knowing that no one's coming to save you, that's a possibility. So you need to, stand up, pull up your pants, and figure a way out of it, and take charge in some situations, even if you aren't in charge, if someone else isn't holding their weight, so that everyone can go home.
Yeah, well said. I want to talk about something that's also very tough to define. You kind of know it when you see it, but there's no real recipe for it. And that is mental toughness. What some people would say, the warrior spirit, the tenacity, the refuse to lose mindset. First of all, Randy, how important is it for soldiers and units to be full of soldiers and Marines and fighters that are tough, tenacious, self-reliant before and during the rigors of combat? And how do you breed that? Is there anything that you guys did in the Rangers or in the SF? How do you get that? I mean, you have good selection courses, so I realize I'm talking soft now, not conventional and all that. But if you were given your best advice, even to soft guys or conventional soldiers, I would assume you think mental toughness is important. How do you develop that?
So I think soft does it really well, where they push you to limits that you think you'll never face in combat.
Yeah.
And even if you're wrong and you face something harder in combat, because you did it, you'll keep trying. I mean, like the final exercise in SFAS is some crazy, who knows how long. I mean, the instructors know, but I never knew how long it was. But it took freaking forever. Was it 30 miles? I have no idea. But you know what? To train for SFAS, I walked 40 miles because I was like, you know what? There's not enough time in 3 weeks for them to carve out enough time for me to walk 40 miles. So if I can walk 40 miles, they'll probably do just well. And I couldn't walk for a week after it, but I walked 40 miles and I said, you know what, I think I'm ready. But I think that SOF does a really good, all the tryouts and things like that are meant to push you farther than you think you could do, and also farther than you probably think you'll have to do in combat. And so you can always kind of think back and like, I've done this before. I did it when I had a twisted ankle and I walked 20 miles. I can walk, with a broken leg.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Well, I appreciate that. Let's move on to another one that is, it's necessary. I think everybody agrees with that, but it's highly controversial about how you do it, why you got to do it, and how you do it and when. And that is physical conditioning. I'm sure, like me, you have experienced what I call the Garrison silk short triathlete who, he equates his ability to run 5-minute miles at San Diego in a triathlon. I'm going to be great in combat as well. And we all know that's often not the case. And then you got the guy that's really not a fast runner, but that guy is like a pack mule. He can carry loads and he can go forever and he can operate and all that. So your personal experience on the importance of legit, effective physical conditioning that is applicable to the environment that you're going to be operating in. What did you see work? What didn't work? What advice do you have for these young leaders so they can train their squads, platoons, companies?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this before where you're talking about they couldn't walk, they couldn't road march and, force march in the hot weather because they hadn't prepped for it. Of course, if it's winter in the States, you're not going to prep for Afghanistan or Iraq, I guess, which is why they ship them out to hotter areas like JRTC and stuff like that. Hopefully it's a little warmer down there. But I think that you have to, it just turned out that at the end of the Afghan war, people knew they were going to Afghan like a year out or 2 years out, right? So they could, the battalion ideally could plan in the summer months to, condition them and move them to the right place where they kind of get the same weather conditions and things like that. I think we just talked about this in the last topic, which was always go farther than you think you'll ever have to seek in combat in order to prepare yourself for the worst possible scenario. Everyone's like, the PT test and the weights but I remember there were 16 teams in Colombia at this one base at the same time during playing Colombia before 9/11. And there's, most of us were out, running around the base in our silk shorts, swimming in the pool. I think we had our own gym or something like that. And then there was the team would get up an hour before us in their BDUs, back then it was BDUs and jungle boots, and be pushing the Hummer around the base all morning. And we'd be running past them in our silk shorts. And when I did it, I was like, man, we should do something like this. We should test ourselves like this, But my team was like, why would we do that? That's stupid. But I was like, this is kind of the hard stuff that we need to test our bodies with. So I'm a big believer in kind of going off script to make sure you're physically fit and training, like doing a BDU run, swim, shoot, so that you've just done an hour of work and now you got to shoot targets instead of just going to the range. Who's the best shot? I am. Well, you are when you're well rested. How are you when you're not well rested?
I know there's an aspect of Marine Corps Sniper School, which is considered a really good school. one of their maybe multiple graded events when they actually do take them to, all right, you're on the range now, you're shooting a target, you're not stalking, is they have to come to the range to the firing line with their heart rate elevated above a certain beats per minute. And so I think they run them and then put them there, but I think they have actually heart monitor and say, no, no, go back. It's got to be like 170 or above, something like that, which a sniper probably would never have, because he's stalking and he's sitting there or laying there. But the point is, they're training these guys under worst case conditions. And the theory, I guess, being if you can hit that target at 800 meters, 600 meters, when you're breathing hard and all that, you're probably going to be able to nail them when everything is calm and all of that. So that overtraining thing, I want to talk a little bit, move on to literal training for combat. In your experience, did you ever get caught short? Observe, we should have spent more time on this in pre-deployment training. Was there anything that you would have done differently? What's your recommendations for these young guys? You've already said train to the environment that you're going to go to, the conditions you're going to go to. That's a principle I think everybody could fall in love with. Any other thoughts on how to better, more effectively train, literally train, tactical training now for combat?
Yeah, I mean, doing as close to live fires on all the skills you think you'll need in combat. You're not going to be able to anticipate them all. I remember I just told you, like, we were the mountain team, right? So for the year before we went to Afghanistan, we actually had a mission money to go to Red Rock in Nevada and do climbing iterations and rehearse all the knots and the litters and things like that. And then we did rock climbing we had some rock climbing places on base and stuff like that. We would keep doing those things, right? So we did all that preparation, and we get to Afghanistan. And I'm like, okay, I put a list of things on the board, right? These are what we got to do. We hit the ground. We got to get everything unpacked. We got to get this set up. And one of the things was, hey, get all the rescue equipment that we've been training with, get it all, put in one location. So if we need it, we can grab it. And I didn't follow up because I didn't do the thing that leaders are supposed to do, spot check. I didn't do it. And sure enough, like 2 or 3 weeks after we got there, we got called to do a helicopter got shot down and pinned down, and the bad guys were heading towards it, and we were going out to rescue them, and we got called up. And everyone's like, yeah, we got called up, we gotta go. So we get all our kit on, and everyone gets on the choppers to go. And this funny story. I had just gotten mailed by the military my issue of the ACUs. We were going from the BDUs to ACUs, and I had DCUs. So we were supposed to wear ACUs. But for whatever reason, the size they sent me was Britney Spears size. It was like extra small or and so like it was up to here, and it was like my midriff was showing. And I didn't know that. I had a box, and I just put all my stuff in the wash to get washed. I didn't have any. I was going to go get the wet ones to put it on, and I was like, oh, I got the things. I broke them out. And I tried to put it on, and it was like, what the hell? And then someone always had to stay back because we were in charge of the base as well, and I had gone in every single mission so far. And so I told my commander, I was like, hey, Paul's going to be in charge of this mission. I'm not going to, because someone has to report, who got on the planes and which helicopter in case they go down and keep track of all that stuff. So I was like, I'm going to do that. So I'm in the rear, and they're on the helicopters. They haven't left yet. And I'm sending all the things up. And the engineer calls, and he's like, hey, Sergeant. I was like, yeah, what's up? He's like, can you get the the whatever, the litter or the ropes or whatever, because they all got on there and they didn't bring anything. And I was like, oh, really, guys? Okay. So I go in there, I go into the supply room. I was like, where is it? What corner is it in? He's like, well, I didn't actually didn't do what you told me to do. It's all over the place. I'm like, oh my God. I just lost it on the radio, and everyone was very quiet while I vented looking for everything. But we all got it sorted out. But so yeah, we never actually practiced that, getting all the equipment ready and getting it on the bird when we hit the ground. That would have been nice. So just doing every little piece of the preparation and rehearsing it before you leave, and then when you get into country, obviously super important, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I want to ask your thoughts on this because I've been there and I've seen it. It did have an effect on me and other Marines and all. I'm talking about casualties, the effects of soldiers, combatants seeing their friends, casualties, whether they're KI or wounded. What's been your observation? I don't know how much of that you've observed, but seeing a friend or a teammate, what's the effect on just the troops, and then the effect on the leaders, and then the other part of the question is, did you have any experience when a very popular guy, very really doesn't have to be a high-ranking guy, but a very popular teammate got killed or very seriously wounded? I've heard anecdotes where that tends to derail a team, a squad, a fire team, a troop, or whatever. So I've asked you a bunch of questions, just asking for your thoughts on the effects of friendly casualties on soldiers, Marines, whoever's on the ground.
So I'm not going to be very much help here. So fortunately, not one of my guys got injured or killed, and none of the friendlies that were with us either. We took everything by force. We always had as many people as we could. Sometimes we had convoys of 20 trucks, and I don't know if that dissuaded people from attacking us, or it was just good luck, or we had good, tricky skills where we'd go one direction, then turn around and go the other direction, or we'd advertise we were going to go to this city and we go to a different city. We did all of that, and we never lost anybody. We only got attacked once. So I didn't, face to face, seeing my team, someone from my team or any of my team members seeing someone get hurt. I never had to get exposed to that. When I was in Panama, I was the guy that was hurt, and I didn't. The only time I saw the other people who were hurt is when I got to the casualty collection point when I finally got there 6 hours later. But I was splitting my leg because everyone else that was in there was pretty much shot. So I didn't bug anyone, and then I ended up getting evacuated out pretty quickly. But we did have obviously people from other teams and other bases that were killed that we knew, and there was a little dip in morale. Obviously, I had a pretty even keeled team. Like there was no one that's like, I'm gonna kill those there's none of that. I feel like there's a lot of vengeance, especially the people who got witnessed their teammates getting killed and they wanted to go out and get revenge. I don't feel like my team ever got to that point, probably because we were in a different location and there was no one to get revenge on, for sure.
Yeah.
So we didn't really have that problem. And then as far as the enemy, for the most part, we didn't address them because when we went through the ambush, we left them behind. So it wasn't an issue for us when we called in air and everything like that.
Understood. Well, we're almost out of time here, but wanted to ask you this: is there any particular war story, so to speak, anecdote in a combat environment that had a profound effect on you, impact at that time, and even still, you remember when this happened. Did anything like that ever happen to you that still sticks freshly in your mind today?
Yeah, I mean, it's the very first time I went to combat in Just Cause, and I just saw there was a lot. I was kind of in a weird position where I wasn't there. There was no leadership. I was a brand new promoted PFC. I was supposed to be a team leader, but my platoon sergeant made me his driver because I was a tabbed specialist, and that's what he wanted for his driver. So I was taken out of my squad, but funny enough, I'd never driven a manual drive. And we had the old World War II Jeeps where we didn't have Hummers back then.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I didn't know how to drive it. And I tried to explain it to him, but he's like, "Hey, go get the Jeep so we can do our rehearsals." I was like, "Okay, Roger that." So I went, and somehow with a couple of quick instructions from people who didn't have time to give me instruction, I got it. It took a while. He's like, "What took so long?" And then he gets in, he's like, "Let's go." And of course I stalled it out like right then, because I had no idea what I was doing. He's like, what's the problem? I was like, "Well, I never driven a stick before." He's like, "Get out." And he points to a guy and he says, you drive a stick, you're my driver, come over here. And he made him his driver. And he's like, you take his spot. So now I'm not even in my squad. I'm just and then when I get into the plane and when I get into the sticks on the plane, I'm just like an extra guy at the back, but I'm not on the right plane to do what my squad was supposed to do on the ground. I was just an
Wow.
extra guy, and I was a little bit. I didn't realize. I mean, I was just going to do with the platoon. I was just going to get with the platoon, and I was going to get with my squad on the ground. That was my plan, but there was no time. I mean, it was like 6 hours before we're boarding the helicopter or the planes, and it was like there's no time to get with anyone. And everyone else was, and all the squads were split up doing their rehearsals, and so it was just a lack of leadership, right? And then of course I break my leg, which obviously didn't harm anything that the squads were doing because they weren't expecting to see me anyway. So it was in my opinion, I still remember that. And as I went up in rank, I made sure that I would always be very clear about where everyone is, that I'm responsible for what they're doing, that they knew what was going on. And I think I did a really good job of that later on in my life. But that was a very, I was barely 2 years in the Army at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of lessons in there too. I can imagine how that felt. Um, I can't let you out of here without asking you the fantasy question I ask anybody. If you had the opportunity to bring back a renowned combat leader from the past, spend a day with that person, who would you choose and why?
So, you're familiar with Major Dick Meadows?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I remember the first time I became aware of him. He's got that. He's got the statue over in not SOCOM, but USASOC over in Bragg. And my father, well, we lived in Iran, but so Dick Meadows was on the Sante raid, and so was Bull Simons. He was leading it. In fact, he pulled Dick Simons from a command to put him on the raid. And then Bull Simons did the EDS rescue as well. And I've talked to some of the the Americans that were rescued when Bull Simons was in charge of that, and I've read the books, and I never saw Dick Meadows mentioned ever. And I had a dream, and I've been working on it, researching it, of writing alternate history of what if Delta Force had actually gone in with, missing a helicopter and actually did the rescue anyway. And so I was researching it, and I went to the Wikipedia page for Dick Meadows because he was one of the guys that was training the original Delta guys up, I think, as a contractor. And in the Wikipedia, it says he also assisted in the rescue of the EDS people, but I never ever saw it mentioned. And so I'm really curious about that. But he did so many great things. I mean, he went to the SAS course, and he married a British woman who was like the daughter of the colonel of the SAS or something. And then he also led the Green Beret team that captured the North Vietnamese as they were proving that they were coming over from Laos. And that's kind of like how when Kennedy actually proclaimed started the Vietnam War officially. So there was a lot of stuff that he did that I'm sure he had some great stories. And I think he was in Korea, and he was the youngest. He was a 20-year-old master sergeant in Korea.
Yeah. Yeah, quite a soldier. And I actually know of him. I was on a deployment, and I'm being careful here. I got exposed to some Delta Force guys. And this was early, only a few years after the creation of the unit. And a bunch of them had been on the Iran hostage attempt. So Beckwith's book came out, and so I was able to ask them, hey, read it. I was asking them a question about the Marine helicopters and all of that. One of those guys was a older Vietnam vet, Max Sog V guy, Special Forces. He also, I think he might have been a couple guys after Dick Meadows with the SAS exchange tour. He actually went through the selection process and passed. He said, you didn't have to, but I wanted to. And fortunately I made it, and my name is on the rolls and all of that, But he told me a lot about Dick Meadows, and you are correct. He had a profound impact upon the creation of the unit, and he said we did have a position for him as a civilian contractor, and he did a lot of great work for us. As you know, he was on the ground in Iran as posing as a businessman or something, providing strategic reconnaissance and all that. And I asked these guys, what do you think if you'd have got to there? And he looked right at me. He said, if we'd have got to that embassy, a whole shitload of bad guys would have got killed, and we'd have got those hostages out of there. He said it was just bad luck. And as you know, that was I think the genesis of JSOC, because it was all screwed up, Marine helos. And I actually knew one of the pilots, Randy, and he said, there was no selection process. I was a first lieutenant, and you're going. And he said, we did not fly helicopters on that raid we'd ever flown before. They were Navy 53s. Right.
Yeah.
And so it was and of course there was not, principles of war. There wasn't unity of command and all that. So at least some good came out of it, And anyway, so I digress. So yeah, that's a good one right there. If you could bring him back, I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that one. Well, listen, before I let you go, you said a little bit about it up front. Remind everybody again, what are you doing? How can you help people? Where can they find you, your book, your services? How do they get in touch with you, Randy?
Sure. Thanks for asking, Mike. So militaryeditor.com is my webpage. Also thestoryninja.com. I have a YouTube channel, Military Writers Academy. I'm starting to do lives to do Q&As for editors if you got a question or about writing or editing. It's oriented towards military memoirs, nonfiction, or even military fiction. I also have a skill bridge. So I don't know how many transitioning service members listeners you have, but if they're getting out, they can sign up for my internship. It's free for transitioning service members. It can be anywhere from 4 weeks to 16 weeks. I've got one person, I think it's doing 5 months. And basically I teach them everything I know about editing and writing. and either help them build an freelance editing business like I have, or help them write their book for 2 or 3 months if that's what they want to do.
Interesting. Well, I'm not going to be surprised if somebody reaches out to you. I think they will. And I Googled you, when I first found you and all that. So you have an impressive background. I urge everybody to take advantage of Randy, and especially if you're a veteran thinking about writing a book. I mean, most guys, can do it and can think about it, but they just never put pen to paper. I know a guy like Randy, you have been very successful. I think that one of your clients actually became a New York Times bestseller, right?
Yeah, so Scott Mann wrote Operation Pineapple Express. I had a big part in that. I helped him out, helped him organize it and outline it, and I even wrote a couple parts of it. But that was a New York Times bestseller back in 2022, about a year after the evacuation. And then I've had like 3 or 4 that were bestsellers on Amazon.
Yeah, cool. Well, listen, Randy, I can't thank you enough for sharing all of your wisdom and insights. This is going to be a great episode. People are going to want to watch this, and can't thank you enough. I mean, I don't know what the internet's going to look like 50 or 100 years from now, but whatever it looks like, these videos will be out there. And, if something that you said sticks in a young team leader or sergeant's mind in a dark, dangerous place 50 years from now, and he remembers to do it or not do it because of what you said, our bones were both rattled with satisfaction. We'll be long gone, but I really appreciate because you've forgotten more than these guys know, and to share it freely like you have is very, very important. So I can't thank you enough, and I would just ask you selfishly to consider coming back again and doing another one on some different topics that could help these young leaders.
Yeah, sure thing. When you got another theme and I can be a help, I will.
Okay, sounds good. All right, audience, I hope you enjoy this podcast. As always, my request is to share it with others so they could grow our ever-growing tribe. We have a YouTube channel. Tell them to go there and sign up. Go to combatleadership.com, sign up for the newsletter and all of that. And with that, we are rounds complete. And as always, leaders, go forth and lead well.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, and recommend to your friends. Please visit our website at combatleadership.com. Until next time, remember the words of the ancient philosopher Plato. Only the dead have seen the end of war.